Benjamin Franklin. You know the name, of course, but what if I told you that everything he ever did, and I mean everything from inventing bifocals to basically winning the Revolutionary War, was all driven by one single powerful idea? It's like a mental model that was forged not in some fancy university, but in the noisy, inky world of a colonial print shop. And that's where this whole story really begins. Let's dive in.
So you have to ask, right? How does one person do all of that? He was a printer who becomes this media mogul, a scientist who literally tames lightning, a diplomat who convinces a king to fund a revolution. I mean, come on. What was his secret? How did one mind hold all of these different people?
Well, the answer starts right here. You could say that Benjamin Franklin's core operating system, the thing that made him tick, was installed when he was just a teenage apprentice. See, he wasn't just learning how to set type, he was learning how to manufacture public opinion itself.
To really get Franklin, you have to get this. He learned how to game the system when he was just a kid. At 16, his own brother, who ran the print shop, wouldn't publish his writing. So, what does Franklin do? He gets creative. He invents someone who could get published. Silence Dogood, the sharp-witted middle-aged widow, and her letters became an absolute sensation. He did it again later with Richard Saunders, the kind of folksy philosopher behind his super-famous almanac. The lesson he learned early on was huge. If your own voice isn't being heard, you invent one that the world simply can't ignore.
And boy, they could not ignore him. 10,000. That's how many copies of Poor Richard's Almanac were sold every single year. You have to remember, in an era when most homes only had one book, the Bible, Franklin's little almanac became this kind of second scripture. It was his way of getting his practical, common-sense wisdom into the hands of ordinary people.
So Franklin gets famous, he gets rich, and he retires from printing at just 42 years old. But a mind like his, it can't just sit still. He looks around his adopted city of Philadelphia and just sees problems that need fixing. So he sets out to invent something completely new, American civil society.
And this right here, this is where you see his absolute political genius at work. Just think about how clever this is. Philadelphia really needed a public hospital, but the Colonial Assembly, they said no. So Franklin comes up with this incredible move, a bill where the government will only kick in £2,000 if the citizens can raise £2,000 on their own first. It was genius. It was foolproof. The public was fired up because their donation was instantly doubled, and the politicians couldn't exactly say no to a public-private partnership, could they? And just like that, the hospital was built.
And that hospital wasn't just a one-off thing. Oh no, it was part of a much bigger plan. I mean, just look at this list. America's first subscription library, the first volunteer fire company, a scientific society, a non-religious university, the first mutual insurance company. This wasn't random. He was systematically building the pillars of a working society, and all of it was based on people cooperating voluntarily, totally independent of the church or the king.
And this same practical, let's solve the problem approach drove all his scientific work. For Franklin, science wasn't some abstract thing you do in an ivory tower. No, it was a way to understand the universe so you could make life better for people living in it. Simple as that.
Okay, let's just tackle the biggest myth about Franklin head-on. Did he actually discover electricity? The short answer is no. People had known about electrical forces for centuries, but what Franklin did was way more fundamental. His contribution was theoretical, and it was profound. He was the first person to propose that electricity was a single fluid, and he gave us the basic language we still use today, the idea of positive and negative charges.
So what really happened with that famous kite experiment? The point was not to get hit by a massive lightning bolt. That would have been a very short experiment. No, the goal was much smarter, just to prove that the stuff in lightning was the same electric matter as the static electricity you could make in a lab. The wet string on the kite picked up the charge from the storm cloud, and when he brought his knuckle close to the key at the bottom, zap, he felt a spark. Theory proven. And it was incredibly dangerous. A Russian scientist tried something similar a year later and was killed.
And the result wasn't just some dusty scientific paper. It was an immediate, life-saving invention. From that abstract theory came the lightning rod, a simple, practical device that could draw the electrical fire silently out of a cloud and protect buildings from one of nature's most terrifying forces.
And here's the thing that's truly incredible about the guy. He could have patented the lightning rod or his famous Franklin stove, and he would have been one of the richest people in the world. But he refused. He believed in what we now call an open-source philosophy. In his own words, since we all benefit from the inventions of others, we have a duty to share our own inventions freely and generously. Just amazing.
So, this reputation he builds as a brilliant scientist and this generous public servant, that becomes his most powerful weapon when he takes on his final and most important job, saving the American Revolution.
When Franklin gets to Paris, he's not just some diplomat. He's a global celebrity, a rock star. To the French, he was the man who had tamed lightning, the embodiment of the Enlightenment. And he played the part perfectly. He ditched the powdered wigs of the French court and wore this simple fur cap, which immediately became a fashion craze. His face was everywhere, on medallions, rings, you name it. This wasn't just vanity, it was a masterclass in public relations and influence.
All that Franklin mania gave him unbelievable influence, and it let him pull off the impossible, securing the Treaty of Alliance in 1778. This treaty brought the entire French military and treasury to America's side. And let's be crystal clear about this. Without that alliance, the revolution almost certainly would have failed.
Franklin's status was so unique, so legendary, that when Thomas Jefferson showed up years later to take over, the French foreign minister asked him, "It is you who replaced Dr. Franklin?" And Jefferson's famous reply says everything you need to know. "No one can replace him, sir. I am only his successor."
All right, so we've seen the printer, the city builder, the scientist, and the diplomat. It's time to pull all these threads together and finally answer that question that's literally sitting in our pockets every day.
Why is Benjamin Franklin on the $100 bill? He's there with all the presidents, but he was never president. Or was he?
The real reason is that Franklin basically did the job of a head of state before the United States even had one. You can think of him as our chief civic founder. He built the country's core institutions. He was our chief scientist, establishing America's reputation for innovation. And he was our top diplomat, the guy who secured the alliance that won the war.
And here's the kicker. Turns out he actually was a president. From 1785 to 1788, he served 3 terms as the president of Pennsylvania. It was the highest executive office in the state at the time, basically the same as being a governor today. So yeah, President Franklin was a real thing.
But the real answer, the single idea that ties everything together, is this. His secret was a simple but incredibly powerful philosophy. Use reason and creativity to solve practical problems for the common good. Whether he was fixing a smoky fireplace or founding a nation, the method was always the same. He lived this wisdom right up to the very end. At 81 years old, he was the oldest delegate at the Constitutional Convention, and he saw his colleagues were about to let the whole thing fall apart. His final speech was this incredible plea for humility. He basically asked everyone to just doubt a little of his own infallibility for the sake of getting something done together.
And that really leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? If Benjamin Franklin's true legacy is this method, this relentless focus on practical, rational problem-solving for the public good, what's the biggest problem we could solve if we just tried to apply his approach today?